against a police state, against racist intersectionality, against political correctness, against mob rule, against the racist socialist left, against the victimhood liars. The idiots have been in charge way too long. And that's why you're here. For the podcast you need. All for liberty all the time. Welcome to Liberty Bites Back. With your host, Brandon Emo.
Welcome to the 6th episode of Liberty Bites Back. Today, I am going over how our rights are not from the U.S. Constitution, nor any parchment. They are inalienable rights that belong to all humans, whether governments want to admit it or not. Liberty is the starting point to understanding inalienable rights. As Aristotle said, "This then is one note of liberty which all democracies affirm to the principle of their state. Another is that a man should live as he likes. This, they say, is the privilege of a freeman, since on the other hand, not to live as a man like is the mark of a slave. This is the second characteristic of democracy. Whence has arisen the claim of men to be ruled by none, if possible, or, if this is impossible, to rule and be ruled in turns, and so it contributes to the freedom based upon equality." Aristotle, Politics 6:2. Aristotle says this: "A free man has liberty to do as he likes, and what will not hurt others. And if you're not allowed, then you are a slave. You're not a free man anymore. If you can't do what you like without hurting others, and that's illegal. That's not freedom." It has also been attributed to the equivalence of free will. As even Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A polity in which there is the same law for all, a polity administered with regard to equal rights and equal freedom of speech, and the idea of kingly government, which respects most of all the freedom of the governed. For now we are certainly understand that a king completely is the opposite of a government, and we would like back then, even as they allowed liberty in some ways, as arguably any government." The liberty is our free will. It is us. It is our mind. It can be our speech. It can be our philosophies. We all must defend our freedom and our liberties. Thomas Hobbes says, "A free man is he that those things which by his strength and wit he is able to do, and not hindered to do what he hath the will to do." And that's in his book Leviathan, Part 2, Chapter 11. The Thomas Hobbes said that, and then John Locke disagreed, stating, "The state of nature, liberty consists of being free from any superior power on the earth. People are not under the will of lawmaking authority or of others, but have only the law of the nature for their rule. In political society, liberty consists of being under no other lawmaking power except that established by the consent of the commonwealth. People are free from the dominion of any will or legal restraint, apart from that enacted by their own constituted lawmaking power according to the trust put in it. Thus, freedom is not, as Sir Robert Filmer defines it, a liberty for everyone to do what he likes and to live as he pleases, and not to be tied by any laws. Freedom is constrained by laws in both the state of nature and political society. Freedom of nature is to be under no other restraint but the law of nature. Freedom of people under the society and made by the lawmaking power established in it. Persons have a right or liberty to follow their own will in all things that the law has not prohibited, and not to be subject or inconstant, uncertain, unknown, and arbitrary wills of others. And John Stuart Mill defined liberty as a freedom to act and liberty as an absence of coercion. So if we are coerced upon, for if someone gets upon our property of ourselves, that is coercion. That is not liberty, nor could ever be considered such. A free man receives full liberty. If you lack such, it's tyranny. And then we would also need to go over freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is one inalienable right that every human is born with. Without freedom of speech, there is no liberty. It has been taken away, for you can't even speak of it itself, except in the cult tyrannical order way of controlled speech, a broken and similar tyranny, as warned by 1984. Freedom of speech, the inalienable right of all humans, must exist to collectively enhance our understanding of all things. The Dark Ages got Galileo. Galileo's technical argument didn't win the day on June 22nd, 1633. The Church handed down the following order: we pronounce, judge, and declare that you, the said Galileo, have rendered yourself vehemently suspected by this holy office of heresy, that is, of having believed and held the doctrine which is false and contrary to the holy and divine scriptures, that the sun is the center of the world, and it does not move from east to west, and that the earth does move and is not the center of the world. Along with the order came the following penalty: we order that by the public the edict of the Book of the Dialogues of Galileo Galilei is prohibited, and we condemn thee to prison of this holy office during our will and pleasure, and as the solitary penance we enjoin on thee for that for the space of 3 years thou shalt recite once a week the 7 penitential psalms. Galileo agreed not to teach the heresy anymore, and then he spent the rest of his life under house arrest. It took more than 300 years for the Church to admit that Galileo was right and to clear his name of heresy. Now, along with the order came the following penalty: we order that by the public edict of the Book of Dialogues of Galileo Galilei be prohibited, and we condemn thee to the prison of this holy office during our will and pleasure, and as a solitary penance we enjoin on thee that for the space of 300 thou shalt recite once a week in 7 parental psalms. Galileo agreed to that. The Dark Ages that ruined many free speech arguers at the time. It made it censor. More cruelty would even make the governments cut the tongues out of the mouths of the free men, stealing their liberty away. Now, without our ideas being allowed freely, the airing of ideas, the development and testing of ideas are unable to exist. We can't constrict the ability of the human mind on how to think, nor how not to think, for both will do the same thing: controlling others. Our ideas can be allowed, but free thought exists, and freedom of speech is a real test if we are free men and free women. To restrict speech is to create an ever-constructing field of permissible thought. Your body and your mouth is yours, and you are able to use your property as you see fit. It's your human nature to have free speech, and it's a burning passion in our existence, and therefore it is an inalienable right to our existence. The right for people to use reasonable force or defensive force for the purpose of defending one's own life or the lives of others, including in certain circumstances the use of deadly force, also known as self-defense, is a human right. It is a God-given right. Saying this, I will go ahead and quote the Bible. Luke 22:36. He said to them, "But now, if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. Right here, this is the Messiah himself, Jesus or Yahushua, the Prince of Peace. He even advised to be in self-defense, along with the Old Testament. Exodus 22:2-3. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed, but if it happens after sunrise, the defender will be guilty of bloodshed. Anyone who steals must certainly make restitution, but if they have nothing, they may be sold to pay for their theft. So even for those of the Torah, their religion is also pro-self-defense, and many ideas and philosophies collaborate to the teachings of many historians like the Savior, Yahushua. As they were always outspoken and very pro-free speech, invoking their rights, and were even noticed by the governments to advance liberty in their time. The Apostle Paul's exercise of his rights as a Roman citizen, as recorded in the books of Acts during Paul, we can see that in Acts 16:19, that mob rule held to those in the Romans in the democracy type thought line, not like our constitutional republic here, but they did have a democratic republic, and they had rights. And it scared them when they were allowing mob rule to roll when seeing that Paul had these rights. I'm going to go ahead and read over these passages with you. This is Acts 16:19-40. When her owners realized that the hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace to face the authorities. They brought them before the magistrates and said, "These men are Jews, and they are throwing our city into uproar by advocating customs unlawful to us humans to accept or practice." The crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas, and the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten with rods. After they had been severely flogged, they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. When he received these orders, he put them in the inner cell and fastened their feet in stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there was a violent earthquake, that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once all the prison doors flew open, and everyone's chains came loose. The jailer woke up, and when he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself because he thought the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted, "Don't harm yourself. We are all here." The jailer called for lights, rushed in, and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" They said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, or Yahushua, and you will be saved, you and your household." Then they spoke the word of the Lord to them and all the others in the house. At that hour of the night the jailer took them and washed their wounds. Then immediately he and all set a meal before them. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole household. When in this daylight the magistrates sent their officer to the jailer with the order, "Release those men." The jailer told Paul, "The magistrates have ordered that you and Silas be released. Now you can leave. Go in peace." But Paul said to the officers, "They beat us publicly without a trial, even though we are Roman citizens, and threw us in the prison. And now do they want to get rid of us quietly? No. Let them come themselves and exhort us out." The officers reported this to the magistrates, and when they heard that Paul and Silas were Roman citizens, they were alarmed. They came to appease them and exhorted them out of the prison, requesting them to leave the city. After Paul and Silas came out of prison, they went to Lydia's house, where they met with the brothers and sisters and encouraged them. Then they left. So we can see what should happen if mob rule is not going to be happening. You need to exhort us out of the tyrannical mob. Get us away from the mob. We all want to be away from these stinking terrible mobs that are happening right now. Then in Acts 22:19-21, Lord, I replied, these people know that I went from one synagogue to another to imprison and beat those who believe in you. This was when he was a Pharisee. This is what he's going over. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I stood there, giving my approval and guarding the clothes of those who were killing him. Then the Lord said to me, go, I will send you far away to the Gentiles. And then they learned that Paul was a Roman citizen, a free man. And then in Acts 22:22-29, the crowd listened to Paul until he said this. Then they raised his voices and shouted, rid the earth of him, he's not fit to live here. As they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and clinging dust into the air, the commander ordered that Paul be taken into the barracks. He directed that him be flogged and interrogated in order to find out why the people are shouting at him like this. As they stretched him out to flog him, Paul said to the centurion standing there, is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who hasn't been found guilty? When the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. What are you going to do? He asked. This man is a Roman citizen. The commander went to Paul and asked, tell me, are you a Roman citizen? Yes, I am, Paul said. Then the commander said, I had to pay a lot of money for my citizenship, but I was born a citizen, Paul replied. Those who were about to interrogate him withdrew immediately. The commander himself was alarmed when he realized that he had put Paul, a Roman citizen, in chains. Now, ideas of free speech for free men and free women have always been existent in civilized society. The only times we were totally removed was called the Dark Ages for a reason. Also, the inalienable right to self-defense is seen as well. We have our rights noticed for a long while, and we're always deserve to have our rights, our God-given rights. They are because you're human, and you are a real, needed voice. The right to privacy, it is an inalienable right. The U.S. are through state rights, granted within the United States, who also grant a right to privacy and recognize 4 torts based on that right: intrusion upon seclusion or solitude, or into private affairs, public disclosure of embarrassing private facts, publicly, which places a person with a false light in the public eye, appropriation of name or likeness. The United Nations even notices the right through their Article 12. It reads, no one shall be subjected to the arbitrary interference of his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon the honor and the reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of law against such interference or attacks. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States ensures that the right of the people be secured in their persons, houses, papers, effects, against unreasonable searches and seizures, shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by the oath or affirmation, the particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. The Fourth Amendment, as the framers attempted to protect each citizen's spiritual and intellectual integrity. A government that violates the Fourth Amendment in order to use violent evidence against a citizen is also violating the Fifth Amendment. The First Amendment protects the right to free assembly, broadening the privacy rights. Some believe that the Ninth Amendment declares the fact that a right is not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution does not mean that the government can infringe on that right. And the Supreme Court recognized the 14th Amendment as providing a substantive due process right to privacy. And that was first recognized by several court justices in the Griswold versus Connecticut, and a 1965 decision protecting a married couple's rights to contraception. On August 22, 1972, the Alaska Right of Privacy Amendment 3 was approved with 86% of the vote in the support of the legislatively referred constitutional amendment. 25, Article 1, Section 2.2. The Alaska's this would be Article 1, sorry. Constitutional Amendment, Article 1, Section 2.2 of Alaska's Constitution states, the right of the people to privacy is recognized and shall not be infringed. The legislature shall implement this section. The Article 1 of the California Constitution articulates privacy as an inalienable act. CASB 1386 expands on privacy law and guarantees that if a company exposes the California's citizens' sensitive information, this exposure must be reported to the citizen. And this law has inspired many states to come up with similar measures on that type of issue of privacy, because it is a right. It's an inalienable right. California Constitution, Article 1, Declaration of Rights, Section 1. All men are by nature free and independent and have certain inalienable rights. Among those are enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness. All political power is inherent by the people. Government is instituted for the protection, security, and the benefit of all of the people, and they have the right to alter or reform the same whenever the public good may require it. The free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination or preference shall forever be generalized in the state, and no person shall be rendered incompetent or to be a witness or a juror on account of his opinions in matters of religious belief, but the liberty of conscience hereby secured shall not be construed to the excuse acts of licentiousness or justify practices inconsistent with the peace or safety of the state. The privilege of the writ of the habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when there is in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require its suspension. All persons shall be ballotable by the sufficient sureties, unless for capital offenses when the proof of evident is the presumption great. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor shall cruel and unusual punishments be inflicted. Witnesses shall not be unreasonably detained, nor confined in a room where criminals are actually imprisoned. The right of trial by jury shall be secured to all and remain inviolate. The limit in civil actions, 3/4 of the jury may render a verdict. A trial by jury may be waived in all criminal cases not amounting to the felony by the consent of both parties, expressed in open court, and in the civil actions by the consent of the parties, signified in such a manner that they should be prescribed by law. In civil courts, fine cases of a misdemeanor, the jury may consist of 12 or any number less than 12 upon the parties may agree in open court. And then offenses heretofore required to be persecuted by the indictment shall be persecuted by information after examining and commitment by the magistrate. By the indictment with the such examination and commitment as prescribed by law, and the grand jury shall be drawn and summoned at least once a year in each county. Sorry about that. There are many recognized and seen inalienable rights shown right there alone in the California Constitution. And another good thing to know for inalienable rights is the human nature will beat your cyberpunk dreams of robots and idiotic thought lines of AI that's being approved. It's a failure. It's a tyranny, destroying the market, devastating the economy, keeping you poor and unable to pay any bills. The bills will pile as these tyrants control all the markets, controlling them all, as the companies declared you a sick creator, a feared and frowned upon human, hiding that frown with a mask that hides the pity that needs given to you. Human nature robbed by the organized gain of thought crime that they place in your worldview, and you just think, why are the organic beings being discriminated? Why? Why so? Well, they deemed the cyborgs okay. They say that you don't have the technology they have to stay sterilized, clean, and pure. You're full of organic material. You're a full organic creature. Might as well just exaggerate to the monster of the lagoon. You're a muck monster of germs. But what if I told you before you say that? Look at our body. It improves itself. Our DNA is a very simple, but not really at all, as it always improves. By some type of way, evolving is real, but evolution, that's a discussion maybe one day. Our wisdom teeth, though, they are evolving away as our body does miraculous things. Even some are having their median artery begin to disappear around 8 weeks after birth, and then having 2 other arteries form in its place. But then there's been also an increase in cases where people have all 3 of those arteries. So that's another way we are evolving as a species. The prevalence of that main artery is around 10%, the people born in the mid-1880s, compared to 30% of those born in the late 20th century. So that's a significant increase in a fairly short amount of time when it comes to evolving. We're resisting infectious diseases. Our bodies are even evolving from virus exposures. In 2007, a group of researchers looking for signs of recent evolution or evolving, that's really what this is, identified 1,800 genes that have only became prevalent in humans in the last 40,000 years, which many of them are devoted to fighting infectious diseases like malaria. More than a dozen new genetic variants for fighting malaria are spreading rapidly among Africans. Another study found that natural selection has favored city dwellers. Living in cities has produced a genetic variant of germs, and it's allowed us to be more resistant to diseases like tuberculosis and leprosy. This seems to be an elegant example of evolution in action, says Aidan Barnes. What they don't really see here is that it's just evolving. He's an evolutionary biologist at the London's Natural History Museum, and he said that in a 2010 statement. It flags up the importance of a very recent aspect of our evolution as a species, the development of cities as a selective force, and even a trend for blue-eyed people for preferring each other and pro-mating. We have an amazing amount of blue eyes in our human race, more than ever. So many interesting turns for our human race through the knowledge of liberty, knowledge that it's human rights through God's will and through the evolution of our minds, which sadly our evolved mindset gets ignored many times. We are in the world where John Locke is taught. Our liberty is known, and we know it not in the law rooms, but instead our rights are stolen. They are condemned. We know our inalienable rights, and nobody will win where a constitutional republic is the law of the land. We will win. They will not win when it's a real constitutional republic. And it will be soon enough, because we have had enough. Freedoms and liberty need restored all the time. I do want to thank you for watching Liberty Bites Back. With liberty, peace.